I have a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to go through first, and then we're going to explain how we expect to get input from the citizens after the presentation. So the agenda says first we're going to talk about introductions, but Mary took care of that, so that's done. Then we're going to talk about a little bit of background, because seeing that not everybody came to the first one, we want to tell you about the comprehensive plan, why we're updating it, how it works, and all that. Then we're going to talk about what we have heard so far, because the input that we got during the first workshop and the Citizen Summit, a lot of people have already told us what they want to change, what they want to see in the future. And then we're going to talk about expected growth. So this is where we say, okay, so this is how fast we're growing. This is what's happening today in the city. With that information, how does that change your mind, or how does that address some of your concerns? So we'll talk about that. And then number five, we get to the most exciting part, and that's the public engagement. And we'll explain to you how we're going to do that. And then we're going to talk about the next steps, because as Mary mentioned, there is another workshop in the future. So Mary already did this part, but just one more item. So Gabby, Hayden, Emily, and myself, we are consultants for the city. We're with Inspire Placemaking Collective. So we are based in Orlando, and we were hired to do the update of the comprehensive plan. So the project background. So as Mary mentioned, what is a comprehensive plan? It's your blueprint for growth. It's a roadmap that tells you how you expect to accommodate growth in the future. The current comprehensive plan includes 12 elements. These are like the chapters of the comprehensive plan, and each chapter addresses a different topic. So we have a future land use element. It has a map, and it shows where we're going to accommodate growth in the next 20 years. The next one is the housing element. So it talks about what types of housing are we going to have? How many houses do we need in the future to accommodate that population growth? How affordable is housing in the city? Then we have a transportation element. As the name says, it talks about how we move people around in the city. It's not just about cars, it's what other modes do we use. And some of you may have participated in past meetings where we started talking about mobility. When we talk about mobility, we want to be able to move around the city, not just in a car, but bicycle, pedestrian, public transit, and any other modes. Another element is the recreation and open space element. And again, as the name implies, it's where we talk about parks, city parks, where should they go, how big. And there is an effort going on at the same time related to a parks master plan. And that one goes a little bit deeper into what happens within each park, what type of programs should the city consider. Another element, and in this case, the city combined two elements. It's conservation and coastal management. Conservation is protection of the environment. Coastal management is what happens when you have a coastal community, we have hurricanes, sea level rise, how is the city prepared to address those issues? We also have an element called the intergovernmental coordination element. What that is about is the city cannot do it by itself. We need to coordinate with the county, with the schools, with the regional agencies, with the Florida Department of Transportation. All this coordination is explained in that element. Another one is the infrastructure element. It includes things like water, sewer, drainage, aquifer recharge, solid waste. So we have to make sure that as the city grows, how is the city going to serve the citizens? This one that I'm going to mention, this is one of the newer requirements. This was not required in the past, but now the state wants every community to have a private property rights element. This one is important because basically what it says is they want every jurisdiction to put it in writing that we're going to respect rights that have been given to landowners. So that's a required element. Now we have two elements in the city of Port St. Lucie that are not required by state statutes, but the city felt that it was very important to address these two topics. One of them is economic development. In the past, the city was a bedroom community, still to some degree right now. A lot of people go to work in the Palm Beaches, a lot of people go Vero Beach, Fort Pierce, and we want the city to be a sustainable community where you can live, work, and play in the same city. So the city wanted to put a lot of effort into economic development. And the other one is public schools. Even though the city is not the agency in charge of providing schools, this element talks about how the city coordinates with the public schools and Lucie Public Schools to make sure that we accommodate growth. So why are we updating it now? So state statutes are our instructions on how to do comprehensive planning. And the state statutes require that every jurisdiction in Florida have to update the plan every 7 years. In the past, the updates were mild. It was just look at any changes in the statutes, address those, and you're done. This time around, the state got a little bit smarter and said, some of these communities have not updated their data and analysis, which is the baseline that we're going by, in many years. So now this time around, everybody has to update the data and analysis, and they have to make sure that they plan for a 10 and a 20-year time frame. So those are requirements that we have from the state. So the last major update that the city had of the comprehensive plan was 2012, so that was a long time ago. Now the next update is not due until 2026, but the city wanted to make sure that we had a thorough update with public input. When you incorporate workshops, and it takes time to do this, so they wanted to get a head start early on so that we could have all the public input that we're including. The other reason, revisiting the community vision. The city has been growing very fast, and priorities change, circumstances change, so we wanted to make sure that we look at the vision of the city and come up with a new vision for the city for the next 20 years. And then, like I mentioned before, the city has been working on a mobility plan, so we want to incorporate those policies into the comprehensive plan. One thing that I want to mention before I go into the schedule is the comprehensive plan elements. Each element has a data and analysis and another section called the goals, objectives, and policies. Data and analysis is where you have all the facts and numbers and figures. The goals, objectives, and policies are where you have the actual strategies that the city is going to use to accomplish that vision. So today, we're going to work on the vision. Where do we want to go? What do we want to be in 20 years? And in April, we're going to come back and figure out how we're going to get there. We're going to work on those strategies. So looking at the schedule, so we started this back in September. We had kickoff meetings with staff, with the executive team, with council members. And then we started working on the data and analysis, collecting all that information. But just looking at data and analysis doesn't give us the whole picture of what the city is like, what the trends are, what the preferences are. That's why we have to have the public input. So we had that workshop back in January, the Where Are We Now? We had about 120 people show up. Then we had the Citizens Summit just last Saturday, and a lot of people came. I don't have exact counts, but we had a lot of people coming by. You missed it, no. So we set up just outside this room where the pool tables are, and a lot of people came and gave us input. So this is where we are now, this workshop. We're in February. So from this workshop on, we're going to be working on that vision. Putting it down on paper, what it is that the citizens want the city to be in 20 years. Then after that, we're going to start working on those goals, objectives, and policies. We come again to the public and get some input. And then sometime later this year in the fall, we go through the adoption process. So that's when we have public hearings, it gets advertised, it gets sent to the state. The comprehensive plan has to go to the state. It's reviewed by different agencies and then finalized hopefully by November. Okay, so I'm going to summarize what we have heard so far, because we have had some very interesting input. So we like to always have a board that says, what do you love about Port St. Lucie? And it's nice to see that, we don't have to focus on the negative, because a lot of people can say, oh, I hate traffic, I hate this, I hate that. But when we start asking people, what do you love about your city? You start getting an idea of it is a safe, clean, well-maintained landscape community. So these are some of the comments that we got. This past weekend on Saturday, we even had kids participating. And it was awesome because they were also putting comments like, I love the parks. And the kid said, the only problem is when I don't see any people in the parks. Then it gets boring. Another girl came and said, I like the stars. I like to see the stars. So it's kind of nice to see what the positive aspects of the city are. Then the workshop, so we had boards in the back, and we asked 6 questions about land use, housing, infrastructure, transportation, and the economy. And we had a lot of people going from board to board, giving us comments and writing their comments. But the recording of that workshop is on the project website, and eventually we're going to have the summary, which is a written summary, also uploaded on the city's website. But some of the comments that we heard, so for land use, a lot of people told us that they wanted it downtown. They said they wanted a place to be able to hang out as a family, where the teenagers can go and spend some time, restaurants, stores, activity. They talked a lot about arts. They wanted an art center, an arts district. They wanted a place, and they mentioned the heart that we showed before. They were like, we need more of that. Parks, like the little kid mentioned, a lot of people told us that we need more parks. Sometimes they go to certain parks, or they're too crowded, and sometimes they don't know about some parks that we already have in the city. A lot of people wanted to control growth. Some people wanted to stop growth, and we're going to talk about growth in a minute. But the main concern was, let's make sure that infrastructure is going along with that growth. Another one was incentivizing the mom and pop businesses. For housing, a lot of people thought that affordable and workforce housing was badly needed in the city. It used to be that Port St. Lucie was very affordable, but as more and more people move in, things are not as affordable as they seem. Some people said that they wanted a variety of housing types, not just single-family homes. Height restrictions. A lot of people said that they like to keep it low-rise in the city. And many people talked about taxes and insurance. They said that housing may be affordable, but when it comes to taxes and insurance, the cost goes way up. For infrastructure, they mentioned again that they wanted the builders to pay their way. Expansion of Wi-Fi, fiber, improving water quality, infrastructure, more street lighting, and improving storm resiliency. And being a coastal community, that's something really important. I'm sorry, that's accessory dwelling units. That's the little cottage that you can have in your backyard in certain areas. And you can, we'll talk about that one later, but you can either rent it or use it for your mother-in-law. And in certain cities, they are allowed, in Port St. Lucie, only in certain areas you can have those. For the economy, I talked about this already, more employment opportunities, technical schools, STEM programs, medical industry, and small businesses. For transportation, they noted that east-west connection is really bad. We have good roads north-south, but east-west is really hard to get across the city. Sidewalk connectivity is not very easy to walk from place to place right now. Public transportation, a lot of people said that they would love to have more of that. Or just alternative modes of transportation, especially for seniors or people with disabilities. Traffic calming, we all know that people like to speed. And then they gave us a bunch of intersection names that they felt needed to be improved. And then we had other comments that didn't fit in the other categories. Community pools, more art, entertainment, and this is kind of related to the downtown, and just resiliency for natural disasters. So those were the comments that we heard. And when we get to the part about public engagement, you're going to recognize some of these themes. So we also had a survey on the website. And we had about 421 entries. We had it running from December until just this past Monday. So we closed it so we can digest that information and use that information for the data and analysis and the vision. But this slide represents how all the zip codes were represented. So we had a good crossover from different parts of the city. What did they tell us? The top 3 concerns that they expressed, traffic congestion, infrastructure issues, impacts on natural environment. In terms of the environment, environmental concerns, protecting water resources, preserving and restoring natural habitats, and increasing green spaces, parks, and tree canopy. In terms of land development, they wanted to, same thing, expand the green spaces and parks, modernizing infrastructure. Infrastructure has been coming up very often, and preserving agricultural lands, like large tracts. And in terms of mobility, the number one request was we need more public transit facilities. But a lot of people still like to use their personal vehicles, so they wanted to accommodate that, and being able to walk around the city, the pedestrian connections. More than half felt that affordable housing was important. And that's a comment that we've been hearing throughout the process. But very few people told us that they feel like there are good opportunities for high school or college graduates in the city. And that's related to the fact that we have been a bedroom community. You graduate from high school, you want to get a job, very few opportunities. If you go to college and want to come back, again, it's hard to find a job here. In terms of housing types, it's a very, the community is very focused on single-family detached. That's what they want to see more. But we started hearing comments about wanting some mix of uses, accessory dwelling units, tiny homes, and townhouses. And for the industries, they want to see more service industry, like health, education, and others, manufacturing, distribution, transportation and utilities, agriculture, and retail. So it's all over the place. I mean, we want the city to be a well-rounded community. I mentioned that we came to the Citizen Summit, and we had exactly the same boards, so we continued getting the input on those topics. Because it was just this past weekend, we have not, come up with a summary, but just wanted to let you know it was well-attended, all ages, and from different parts of the city. We had a map that showed where people lived, and people came from all over the city. So let's talk about what is going on in terms of what the city is planning for the near future. Because the comprehensive plan is going to plan for 20 years down the road, but the city has already started some programs that we want to talk about. And let's start with the population projections. Because the statutes say that the plan has to be based on the minimum amount of land that we need to accommodate the medium projections that the Bureau of Economics and Business Research publishes. So we have very detailed instructions on how to do this. We could say, Port St. Lucie is going to triple in population. We'll have to justify that. How are we going to do that? Or we're going to say, no, we're going to stop growing. We're not going to accept any more growth. Well, no. The state already said medium or higher. So we have like a base number, and we can go up from there, but not lower than that. So BEBR, the Bureau of Economics and Business Research, they don't do population projections for the cities. They only do that for the counties. So for Port St. Lucie, this is what they came up with. They said Port St. Lucie, if we look at the low projection, by 2045, they're going to have 404,000 people. If we look at medium, that's 508,000. Medium high, 560, and high, 613. So we had to be medium or higher. Now we figure out what the proportion of the city is to the county, and we did some assumptions working with staff. We have been growing tremendously in the past. Now, are we going to continue growing that fast? We have to consider, once we pick this number, if it is too high, now we're going to have to start planning for a lot of growth. What if that growth doesn't happen? Or what if we come up low and then are needing to catch up quickly in the next few years? So it's a tricky exercise, but we finally came up with some numbers that the council members were comfortable with, and staff. So this is what we think is going to happen. So as of 2024, we had to have about 254,000 permanent residents. If you add to that the seasonal population, which we're required to add to that, it gives us a number of 261,000 people. That's how many people we have here today, actually, as of April of last year. If we use the population projections that I showed you on the previous page, we would have 344,380 or 415, that's medium, medium high, and high. It includes permanent and seasonal population. So we decided that we were going to use the 380,000 as our benchmark for 2045. Now, once we pick this number, it doesn't mean that it's going to stay that way for the next 20 years. The plan, like I mentioned earlier, it gets updated every 7 years. So in 7 years, if we see that we were way off, it can be adjusted. Or if in 2 years we see that, wow, something happened and now we're building faster, or maybe the housing market is not doing that great, it can be updated. It's not a number that gets locked in for 20 years. So that means that, that between 2024 and 2045, we're going to have an additional 118,000 people. It sounds like a lot of people, but let me explain this next few slides. So we have to look at where are we going to put them? And when we think about the roads and, we don't have a lot of vacant land, so where are these people going to go? So when we put together the vacant land map for the city, it was like looking at a chickenpox map, because if you look at the area east of 95, there are a lot of tiny little red dots. All of those are the already platted vacant single-family lots. And those people have the right to go in and get a permit for those homes. So it's already known that those lots will fill up in the future. The land that you see on the west side, these are all the planned communities that years ago, they got approval for a certain number of units. So like, remember we talked about the property rights element? If those developers already got approved for a number of units, we cannot take that away from them. So we know that development is going to happen there. Now, the transition between this slide and this slide is that now we have just the residential portion that is not within a DRI or a planned unit development. And now this is, let me see. Okay, so in those areas that are planned, we already know that they are going to be building 40,000 houses. So these are the houses that have been, not specific houses, but the development levels that have already been approved. So in those 40,000 houses that we see coming in line in the next few years, that means it can accommodate 115,000 people already. Remember we talked about 118 extra? So we only have to worry about 3,000 people, really. So let me go back here. So this map shows where all those planned communities are, like Tradition and Southern Groves and all those places where they already have development programs approved. So I want to tell you about downtown. Like I mentioned earlier that a lot of people ask for a downtown. They want a place to hang out. They want a place where they can have restaurants and shops and recreation and where they can meet people and just have community events. So we met with some staff members who have been working on this project. So a lot of people know this as the city center, is where the convention center is located. It has been rebranded. Now it's called Walton on 1 because it's at the intersection of Walton Road and US 1. And there is a good-sized piece of land there that the city has plans to create a downtown there. So we got some really cool images from staff that show what that could look like in the future. So if you look at, and this thing is not working, but if you see on the top, there's like a yellowish building, that's the convention center. Sorry, community center, yes. If you look, there is like an avenue coming down and buildings on both sides. So those are going to be mixed-use buildings where you have ground floor retail and apartments or offices above. So the staff has been working on getting this off the ground. So working with developers. The city is not in the business of going and building stuff, but they are working with partners to get this started. The portion on the right is going to be a recreation facility. And this, let me see this one. They have provisions for parking. They're going to be building parking garages to accommodate the need, of people visiting the downtown. And these are some images of what it could look like. So you can see that there are going to be, 5 stories about. So these are just an idea of what that could look like. So you could have events, you could have festivals. Yes? It is the plan, but it's not locked in. So like buildings may not look exactly like that. The city has to issue an RFP, for example, for a developer to come in and say, yes, I'll take care of that lot, I'm going to build this and this, but anybody who gets land in there will have to be consistent with this plan. So the flavor of it will remain the same. The details of the buildings may change, the architecture. This image that we see here, it's mixed use, it's medium rise, and it's, the layout of the lots has to be pedestrian friendly. It has to be, preserving that space in the middle, which is kind of like a boulevard. So that's the plan for the downtown. So when yes, you have a question?
That's the right of that festival area. Will it be commercial properties? Because nobody will want to live there when there are festivals going on all weekend.
And, that's something that, the city will work with, the developers. They have enough parking already within the site to accommodate anybody that comes to the site. And let me go back to these pictures. And then the other plan that I wanted to talk about, a lot of people that we have met with, they were not familiar with the city plans for the Port District. Very few people have been there already or knew that it existed. But if you go to the city's website, you can see the documents, the pictures, and the programs that they have for this area. So including open space, restaurants, sufficient parking, playgrounds. So, it is one of the efforts that the city has been working on to satisfy the need for additional parks and open space. In terms of affordable housing, so I mentioned earlier, I mentioned earlier that a lot of people talk about the need to have affordable housing and workforce housing. So we met with somebody from staff and talked about all the programs that the city has going on at this time. So they have a lot of assistance, whether they're using federal programs, state initiatives. Typically, these programs address the need for low or very low income residents, either for home ownership or rental assistance. One exciting program that they're working on right now is HUD is paying for a study to figure out how to incentivize affordable housing. So they're going to come up with some ideas that we will incorporate into the comprehensive plan related to how can we get developers to start providing some of these affordable housing that is badly needed. So again, between downtown, parks, housing, there are some things already in the works. And it's good for the citizens to be aware of those. So in terms of the engagement, what we're going to do today, so we talked about population growth. We're going to have 118,000 more people coming. We have a map in the back, and that map is it's a map of the city, and it's divided into planning areas. The city has been keeping track of how many housing units are within each planning area, how many units are approved already for those planning areas. So our job, when we go to that board, is to figure out of the 118 that we're going to get in 2045, 115 are already accommodated. Where are we going to put the additional 3,000? So we give you some options there. Are we going to have to annex land so that we expand the city limits? Or should we spread them out like in areas east of 95? Should we look at maybe increasing density and maybe looking at like downtown, we go to multi-story? Should we start looking at townhouses, maybe where they're not allowed? So, that's one board. The next one is non-residential uses. So we talked about downtown, so now we know there is going to be a downtown. But there may be a need to have other non-residential uses in the city. So we provided 2 boards with different types of uses: industrial, research development, retail, hotels, healthcare, and it's the same question. Where should those be located in the city? And there is an option that says, I know we need the use, but I don't know where I would put it. And you can put a dot on that box. The next one is about housing. Like I mentioned already, the city is addressing, or implementing programs that address very low-income housing, but what about the missing middle? The middle-class America, the regular people that just need a decent house where we can live. We provide options of different types of housing on those boards, and your job is to tell us where would you put that. For example, multifamily. If you think we need multifamily in the city, where would you put that? The categories are single-family homes, townhomes. We have multifamily, 2 stories, multifamily 3 to 5 stories. We have mixed use. We are also having tiny homes and the accessory dwelling units. Like I mentioned, it's like the cottage home that you have in your backyard. The other board has to do with the modes of transportation. So assuming that you have the ideal facilities, very shaded sidewalks, very shaded and comfortable bicycle trails, which mode of transportation would you be willing to explore? So it's not like today, because we know it's not comfortable to walk today, but if you had those perfect facilities, which mode of transportation would you like to explore? And the last one is the vision banner. So this one is where you just pick up a marker and you write a comment. And the question is, what is your vision for 2045? And when we ask, what is your vision, it's not like, oh, it's going to be horrible. It's going to be so many people. It's going to be so much traffic. No, if you were the mayor and you could change things, what do you think it should be? What would you like to see in 2045? That's what we want to hear that. And then we also have a board. We call it the Community Idea Wall. It's for any other comments that you may have, maybe not related to housing, not related to transportation. That's where we want the comments to go. So before we go to the back, I want to talk about the next steps. So we have a project website. Like I mentioned, we closed the survey, but there's a lot of information on the project website that we would love for you to go to. And if you have your phone with you, you can scan that QR code. We have the QR code on the boards too, if you want to do that later, or you can ask anybody from staff to give you the address. And then we're going to come back on April 21st, and that's when we're going to do the how do we get there. So when we have the vision, then we're going to figure out what the strategies should be. And I think that's all we have in terms of presentation. So what I would like to do now is, if you move to the back to the boards, we're going to have staff members at each station. So if you have any questions, or you don't know where to put your comment, or you don't understand the questions that we put on the boards, we'll be happy to answer those. So with that in mind, let's go to the back.